Berachot, 6th chapter, 6th Mishnah. An introduction. Amru Chachamim, the sages said, Shnaim she'achlu ke'achad, two people that ate together, Echad mehem yotzer b'kat chaviro. One can include the other one in his blessing. V'chen yalacha b'chol habrachot. And it's not only when you're talking about blessing for food, that's the law when it comes to all blessing. שאחד יכול לברך ולהרציא בברכות האחרים עד חובתם. That one can make the blessing and everybody now is included within that blessing. אלא שיש בזה שלושה תנאים. But as we're going to see, it has to have in it three conditions in order for the other people to be included. What are the three conditions? Condition number one, שהמברך יתכוון להוציא את השומעים ידי חובתם. That the one who makes the blessing has to have in mind that the other one is going to do the obligation through his blessing. That's the first condition. Second condition, שאחרים ישמעו את הברכה כולה, that everybody else is going to hear the entire blessing, מתחילתה ועד סופה, from beginning until end. And the third, שהשומעים יתכוונו לצאת בידי חובתם, that those who hear the blessing have to have in mind that they're doing the obligation through this guy making the blessing. ויש הבדל בעניין זה בין ברכות הנהנים לשאר כל הברכות. And we're going to see that there's going to be a difference between blessings that one does for enjoyment, for example, when he wants to eat or drink, or blessing that he's obligated for from the Torah. What's the difference? שבכל הברכות, that in all other blessings, not the enjoyment ones, אף מי שכבר יצא ידי חובתו, even somebody who did his obligation, יכול לברך כדי להוציא אחרים ידי חובתם. He is able to bless in order for the other people to do their obligation. For example, even though you did Kiddush on Shabbos, but your wife did not hear Kiddush, one may say Kiddush for the wife again, because there's an obligation to make Kiddush. ואילו בברכת הנהנים, but in blessings of enjoyment, just remember that Kiddush is not, one doesn't do it because he wants to drink wine. He does it because he is commanded by God to do it. Two different things. But if he wants to drink wine and he made a blessing on the wine, and then his wife also wants to drink wine, it's regular Tuesday, there's no Kiddush, she also wants to drink wine, he may not make a blessing on wine in order to have her because he already did his obligation, as we're going to see soon. ואילו בברכת הנהנים, but if it's in a blessing for enjoyment, אם כבר יצא, if he already did his obligation, אינו מוציא אחרים ידי חובתם. He is not able to include others in their obligation. טעם ההבדל שביניהם מבואר ברש"י. רש"י explains the reasoning for that. שהמצוות חובה הן על כל אדם, because the commandments are an obligation on every person. In other words, everyone is required to make Kiddush. והואיל וכל ישראל ערבים זה בזה, and since all Jews are responsible one to another, הרי המברך כאילו מחויב בדבר. If there's another Jew who didn't make his obligation, it is like it is your obligation because the other Jew didn't do his obligation, and we are all responsible for one another. אבל ברכות הנהנים, but when it comes to blessings of enjoyment, אף על פי שחובה על הנהנה לברך, even though if you want to drink or to eat something, you have an obligation to bless, מכל מקום אין עליו חובה ליהנות כדי לברך. It says, when do you have the obligation? Only if you want to partake and enjoy. You're not obligated. If you don't want to partake and enjoy, you don't have an obligation. ולכן אין עליו ערבות בברכה זו. Therefore, he's not responsible in this blessing to other people. והוא פטור ממנה. He's not obligated in that blessing. ואינו יכול להוציא את חברו שנהנה ומחויב בה. And he cannot include his friend that his friend is already enjoying in something. Okay. משנתנו בא ללמד, our Mishnah comes to teach, שיש בברכות הנהנים תנאי נוסף, that when it comes to blessings of enjoyment, there's another condition besides the three that we mentioned before. והוא, and that's that condition, הקביעות, the establishment. What does it mean, the establishment? כלומר שאין אחד יכול להוציא בברכתות האחרים ידי חובותיו. It means that one cannot include others in the blessing אלא אם כן קבעו להם סעודה בחבורה, unless they're having the meal together, they establish the meal together. ונוהגים היו בימיהם. And what does it mean establishing a meal together in the time of the Gemara, time of the Mishnah? כשהתוועדו בחבורה לסעודה, that when they established a meal, היו מסובים על מיטות. They used to lay down on beds. ונשענים על יד השמאלי, and used to recline on the left hand. ואוכלים ושותים בהסבה, and they would eat and drink while reclining. מכאן שלא היה קביעות סעודה בימיהם. In other words, in those times, when did you establish a meal? אלא כשישבו בהסבה, only when you lay down and you recline. ברם בימינו, but in our days, people don't have that custom. שאין רגילים לאכול בהסיבה. Nobody reclines while they're eating. הישיבה ליד שולחן אחד הוא כהסיבה שבימיהם. The fact that we're eating on one table, this is considered to be like their time reclining. וכן אמרו, and also this says, שאם אחדים הזמינו עצמם לסעודה, that if a few people made a meal together, ואמרו נלך ולסעוד במקום פלוני, or they said let's go into this place and have a meal together, אף על פי שישבו בלא הסיבה, even though they might not recline, just the fact that they're going to say, the fact that they said they're going to eat together, it's considered to be a meal together. הרי זה קביעות, it's considered to be an established meal within the group. Okay, let's start. היו יושבים לאכול, the group sat down to eat, בלא הסיבה, without reclining. והרי זה סימן שלא נתוועדו לאכול בחברו. And as we mentioned before, this is a sign that they didn't mean to eat together. כמו שביארנו למעלה, like we mentioned above. כל אחד ואחד מברך לעצמו. So because they didn't even intention to eat together, each one now has to make the blessing by himself. שהואיל ואין כאן קביעות סעודה, since they didn't establish that they're all eating together, אין אחד יכול להוציא ברכתו את האחרים. One cannot include in his blessing all the other people. אלא כל אחד ואחד צריך לברך ברכת המוציא, which means that everybody together everybody individually needs to make the blessing of המוציא לחם מן הארץ, and not one person can do it for everybody else. הסבו, what happens if they all recline, which means now they're establishing a meal? אחד מברך לכולם. Then it's good if one can make the blessing for everybody else. בא להם יין בתוך המזון. What happens if in the middle of the meal somebody brings a bottle of wine for everybody? אם הוגש יין למסובים בתוך הסעודה, if wine was introduced into the meal in the middle of the meal, אף על פי שקבעו סעודה זו בחבורה, even though they established it as everybody together, ואחד יכול להוציא ברכתו את כולם, and it should be that only one needs to make המוציא לחם בורא פרי הגפן, he needs to make the blessing on the wine בורא פרי הגפן, and he can include the other everybody else. We're not going to do that. Why not? כל אחד ואחד מברך לעצמו. Nevertheless, with the wine, each one blesses to himself. Now, why is that? ברכת בורא פרי הגפן, the blessing of בורא פרי הגפן. הטעם מבואר בגמרא. The reason is brought down in the Gemara. הואיל ואין בית הבליעה פנוי. It says, since they're eating, their mouth is full. כלומר, which means, שטרודים המסובים באכילה לבלוע מה שבפיהם, because they're busy, all the rest are busy eating at the time. ואין שמים ליבם לשמוע את הברכה מפי אברך, and they don't have any intention to listen to his blessings. Because everybody is right now eating. Before on the bread, nobody started eating yet. But over here, the busy eating, and when you're busy eating, you don't usually concentrate on somebody else's talking. ויש מפרשים, there are those who say, second opinion, שאין בית הבליעה פנוי, when it says that your mouth is not empty, is not free, לענות אמן. It says they're in the middle of the meal, they cannot answer amen to his blessing. שהואיל ועוסקים באכילה, that since they're right now, they're in the middle of the meal, they're busy eating, אם יענו אמן, if they're going to say amen, על הברכה, on the blessing, יש חשש שמא יקדימו קנה לוושת. It's possible that the food is going to go down the wrong pipe, ויבואו לידי סכנה, and they might choke, God forbid. לאחר המזון, but if you're talking about the wine that comes in that second meal that we discussed before, אבל על היין שלאחר המזון, but on the wine that comes after the meal, which means they're not eating anymore, אחד מברך לכולם. Since there's no food anymore over there, and just there's wine over there, then one can make a blessing for everybody else. ומוציאם ידי חובותם, and he's including them in the blessing. שהואיל וסיימו כבר את הסעודה, since they already finished the meal, יכולים הם לשמוע את הברכה, they can pay attention to the blessing, ואף לענות אמן עליה, and they can even answer amen because they've got nothing in their mouth. והוא המברך על היין, and the one who makes a blessing on the wine, אומר על המוגמר, he says another blessing on the mugmar. Now what's in the mugmar? ברכת הבשמים, he makes a blessing on fragrant smells. מוגמר היינו בשמים הנותנים על גבי מחתה של גחלים. These are kind of spices that a person puts on coals שהיו מביאים לפני המסובי להריח בהם, that he would bring in front of the people to smell, to give a good smell. ומברכים עליהם בורא עצי בשמים, and you make a special blessing on it, the one who created trees of fragrances, of perfumes. בעל תוספס יום טוב כותב, the בעל תוספס יום טוב writes, שנקרא מוגמר על שם הגחלים, that the reason it's called מוגמר because of the coals, שתרגום גחלים גומרין, because the coals are translated into the word gomer, mugmar. בהשתתנו בא ללמד, our Mishnah comes to teach, שהמברך לכולם על היין שלאחר המזון, that the one who blesses on the wine that after the meal, מברך לכולם גם על הבשמים. Since he started blessing, he should continue to be, he was designated for the blessing on the wine, we also designated automatically to make the blessing on the spices. אף על פי שאין מביאים את המוגמר אלא לאחר הסעודה. Even though you only bring the מוגמר after the meal. כלומר, לאחר ברכת המזון, we bring it after the whole meal, ונמצא שאין המוגמר מן הסעודה, and it's not part of the meal at all. מכל מקום, מי שהתחיל ברכת היין, but because that we let the person who already started the mitzvah of blessing the wine, זוכה גם בברכה על המוגמר. We give him the merit to also say the blessing on the spices.